Tonight, we're taking a hard look at a story that's captured headlines and left opinions divided across the country. OneTaste, founded by Nicole Daedone, was once hailed as a revolutionary self-help organization promising empowerment through a practice called Orgasmic meditation. Yeah, it's not your typical meditation class, that's for sure. And this wasn't just another wellness fad either. It became a multi-million-dollar business, drawing in thousands of followers, but behind the glossy success, some former members and critics say there was a much darker side. Allegations began to swirl. Accusations of cult-like control, emotional manipulation, and even forced labor. Former employees accused OneTaste leaders of forcing them to perform unpaid labor and engage in unwanted sexual acts as part of their job. They claim they were pressured to have sex with clients or other members. Federal prosecutors say that Daedone and other leaders exploited vulnerable people, all under the guise of personal growth. Nicole Daedone, who adamantly denies these charges, is set to stand trial, facing up to 20 years in prison if convicted. She insists her teachings were about empowerment and healing, not coercion or abuse. Merit TV's Lonnie Coombs, a former Los Angeles prosecutor, sat down with Nicole and her attorney, Jennifer Bongine, in an exclusive interview as they prepare for Nicole's trial in May. So, Lonnie, what was it about this case that caught your interest?
You know, Dr. Phil, there's so many intriguing aspects to this case, starting off with Nicole Daedone. She is the female founder of this sexual wellness education company called OneTaste, and it is all built around this practice of orgasmic meditation, or OM, they call it for short. And essentially, it is simply this. It is a 15-minute practice between a woman and a partner. And the way they would demonstrate this for people would be in front of the classroom. There would be a table up on the stage. There would be a woman laying there, naked from the waist down, with her legs spread apart. And then a partner, a man or a woman, would come up, put gloves on their hands, and then they would be taught to stroke the woman in her very specific point in her intimate area in a very specific way, tempo, pressure, for 15 minutes. And this exercise, this practice, was supposed to release all sorts of trauma and cause healing and emotional releases and depression and have the effect of psychedelic drugs. Nicole has all sorts of scientific research that says that this solves all different kinds of things for women. It empowers them and helps them feel control over their body. And Dr. Phil, it became very, very successful. One year they made $12 million in revenue. They got celebrity endorsements from Gwyneth Paltrow. She's the leader in the wellness area. Khloe Kardashian, Tony Robbins. It went around the world. It was very popular. And as the years went on, there's other sides started to come out from former employees who said there was a darker side to this, that she was being manipulative in her practices with her employees. And then we had this documentary come out from Netflix a few years ago that kind of showed this other side and had these former employees talking about things that were happening. And then we had the federal indictment. And this came down in 2023, where the government charged them with a criminal charge here, which they're going to go to trial in just a few weeks.
Let's take a look at your interview with Nicole and her attorney, Jennifer.
Orgasmic meditation. So tell us, what is it exactly?
So it's a scientifically backed practice, partnered practice, where the stroker would stroke a woman's clitoris with the same kind of focus and intention that you would use in any kind of mindfulness meditation. What's important about it is that you're tapping into sexual energies in order to drive the attention. Why is that important? Because it gives you resilience. You're hitting really powerful states, but very simply. And it increases, everything from clarity to one's sense of happiness, well-being.
I think people, if they've looked at some things on social media or looked at video or the documentary that came out, they picture a woman laying on a table in front of a group of people watching, and the ladies, naked from their waist down with their legs spread. And it's like, people go, that's, dirty, or that's perverted. And yet it sort of is a dissonance there between what they see and what you're describing.
For sure. It's not an exhibitionist practice. It's nothing of that nature. And by the same token, as a woman, I had never seen what was possible in terms of my body, in terms of de-escalation of my nervous system, in terms of a natural kind of healing. And then once I saw that, an entirely new world opened up to me where it was, using my sexual energies defined on my terms as a woman.
What was your inspiration for actually starting a company based on this?
I was going to be a Zen nun prior to my first experience, and so the experience for me was so profound that all of that mind chatter that I experienced as a woman, all of that tension, all of that frustration and upset, suddenly it was like my mind was on the open road and I was clear and I felt connected to everything. When I had that experience, I was clear that what I wanted to do as a Zen nun, I would be doing this way. I started practicing with that same rigorous level of practice, and then suddenly something happens, and I wanted everyone I ever met, every woman, to have it if she wanted it.
And was that because the practice, you say, just opens your mind, or does it teach you about having more control over your own body?
What the practice of orgasmic meditation does is it trains the mind in all arenas, and it trains you how to control your own nervous system from the inside rather than having it controlled from the outside.
I want to dig into the business side of this for a moment, how you built this business. So you started in 2004. In 2009, there's a New York Times article that comes out and kind of gives you some attention. 2011, you give this TED Talk that's got, 1.5 million views, or probably more at this point on YouTube. And you also came out with your book, Slow Sex, that same year, which got a lot of attention.
It did.
And then 2014, by then you're named as one of the fastest growing companies. What did you think the key to your success was to be able to grow that big?
The idea was a clean, well-lighted place to explore your desire, to explore this practice. And we haven't had that. And so we put up all of the protocols. How do you guarantee consent from the get-go? Yeah. All of these elements, that's really what a woman's sexuality has to do with. It's in the mind. You have to feel safe. You have to feel held. You have to feel clear about what you're doing. You have to know the parameters. All of that is built into the practice. And so I think that's what came for women. And then, to be honest, for men, they were just so happy to have someone tell them what to do.
Talk to me about how the employees would be hired and then they would work together and live together. Right. Explain that structure, how it was set up.
I had this vision that the business itself would be supporting people's ability to practice, that I wanted that to be priority, that I wanted people's psychological, emotional health to be the priority, and then they could work to support that. And then in terms of the living arrangements, if you have these co-living arrangements, then you don't have duplication of infrastructure. So you don't have 15 ovens. So the idea was that we could live very much the way that one would in a monastery and begin to share resources.
Mm-hmm. And when they were, all of these employees, they would be living together, sleeping together. Were they assigned like bedrooms? And
No.
They weren't?
No. A lot of the houses that are mentioned in the indictment and such are houses that students started themselves, that we had nothing to do with.
Okay. So you were not in control of them?
At all.
Was there an emphasis on it being communal and for them to be getting along and, to be sharing beds with each other?
So first of all, it was consensual. There were people who worked with us and didn't live in the houses. So I think that's important to know.
Yeah.
The beds together, that's totally what people wanted to do. That was up to them. Nobody was assigned anybody or to sleep with anybody.
As you know, there's been allegations that in these, communal homes that they'd be assigned not just a bedroom, but, to sleep with specific people. Right. And you're saying that that's not accurate.
Your body is a system, and when it's running right, you feel focused, energized, in flow, but sometimes we struggle to find that flow state. Why? because there's too much static in our system, brain fog, fatigue, and inflammation. The Echo Flask clears the static by infusing your water with molecular hydrogen, a natural science-backed gas that helps your body think sharper, recover faster, and run smoother. This is more than hydration. It's better focus, more energy, faster recovery, less internal stress, and longer-term benefits that keep you sharp. When your water works harder, your whole system does too. Find your flow state with the Echo Flask hydrogen water bottle and get an unlimited supply of hydrogen water at home and on the go. Visit echowater.com/Phil and use code Phil for 10% off. That's echowater.com/Phil. Enter code Phil to save 10%.
I'm saying that may have happened in student-run houses that we had nothing to do with, but that wasn't what we did.
So some of the people who were working towards becoming employees, I guess,
Right?
they talked about how when they would talk to people in the company, that they would ask them about their prior histories, their prior traumas. Does that ring a bell?
The thing that rings a bell is intakes for intensives,
Yeah.
courses that people took, but not this.
Explain that.
We would have these 2-week intensive courses. There would be 20 or 30 people. And then they would do an intake. In the intake, they would say what they wanted from the course, what their concerns were, anything in their background that would block them in the course, anything that we should know about in places that they needed special care, tending to, attention.
And I just want to point out, having spoken to many people who participated, OneTaste was very good about saying, you have some things going on in your life that maybe this isn't a fit for you right now. And a lot of people did seek out OneTaste because they were struggling. Yeah. And OneTaste said, you know what? This isn't for you right now. Yeah. And then maybe at some later point, this will be a better choice for you. So they were very good about guiding students, guiding people who were employees or wanted to be employees. And it wasn't just anybody could show up and, let me participate.
I think that's a really important point, because one of the tactics that they specifically allege in the indictment is intentionally recruiting people who had suffered prior trauma. Right. Essentially saying that in these intake processes, as you learned about people's vulnerabilities, their prior trauma, that you would then sort of use that in a way that would end up causing them more harm. Was there a vetting process?
It's an advanced practice. This is not light fare. So I was very clear, and this isn't for you. This is not the time. So no, it was the exact opposite. I wanted the people who were in there to be able to walk in, get what they came for, thrive, have a profound experience, not to have any kind of limits that were pushed. I was working to end trauma, not in no way to contribute to it.
Yeah.
And just to jump in here, as someone who's read the statements of some of the people who are now, complaining about their experiences, these were people that were seeking it out with full knowledge. So the idea that OneTaste was searching out people for trauma is actually absurd, frankly. These were people that may have had trauma in their past and were searching for ways to cope with it or heal themselves. So it was the reverse. It was not the opposite, where OneTaste was searching these people out.
What exactly are they charged with?
So they're charged with one count of forced labor. Now, forced labor is essentially, they're saying that she and her right-hand person, Rachel Cherwitz, who is the head of sales, that they conspired together to get people to come and do work for them, services or labor, that they financially benefited from, and that they did it in a way that people felt like if they didn't do this work for them, that they'd be harmed somehow. Stereotypically, a forced labor case is like young girls being brought into the country, being told you're gonna have this wonderful job, and instead they're put in a sweatshop and they're told they have to pay off their expenses first, all their documentation is taken away from them. That's the kind of thing you're usually looking for in a forced labor charge. That's not really what's going on here. What is being charged here, some of the specific tactics that the prosecution has alleged is that they would intentionally recruit people who had suffered trauma, past trauma, sexual trauma, so that they could exploit them more easily. They induced members to incur debt to buy courses. The members would talk about how they would say, you need to buy this course, this coaching course, or this weekend retreat, or a year membership. A year membership costs $60,000. And when they would say, I can't afford that, they would be encouraged to open lines of credit. They'd say, hey, here's a credit card. I'll help you sign up so that you can pay for these courses. So they got them to incur debt.
If we can back up a minute, when you talk about the setting where this orgasmic meditation takes place, is this done with a partner or that they know, someone they come with? Is it a stranger? Is it a therapist? Is there context to it? Why is it done in front of an audience?
Yeah, so it's literally done, the way they're presenting it as an educational course. Essentially, they're teaching, like a cooking demonstration, right? So they're sitting there and doing it for the audience. This is how they want people to understand it. And the best way to do it is to be able to watch and see. Now, when you talk about who's actually doing it, that's where we get into the gray area, because they were using employees, usually, to be the women, and then the people who would come up and do it, it could be other employees, or sometimes they would have people from the audience come up. Sometimes they would be investors in the company, and the employees were saying that they were feeling pressure to go ahead and perform in these demonstrations for people that they didn't know, that were strangers. But Dr. Phil, the interesting thing is, they didn't hide that. I mean, that was the basis of this company.
And the fact that they wore gloves, was that to introduce some kind of a clinical environment, that there was no actual touching, physical, skin-to-skin contact?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think that was part of it, because the point was not to reach orgasm. It wasn't necessarily a sexual type thing as part of it. It was women's sexuality that was being explored here, and a way for them to feel empowered by it and feel in control of it. But it was also so much more than that, you know, as far as all of the different things that it could invoke in the person. And also they talked about how it would make them feel connected, less isolated, less lonely, when they felt like there was this connection with a person. And their research says it doesn't matter who the person is.
Did they ever have any reactions to it? Did people have bad experiences where they had to seek help or whatever? Did people complain? If you're a business owner, listen up now. You won't want to miss this. Are you sure you're not leaving money on the table when it comes time to exit? Well, thousands of business owners have already used FYSI's exit strategy and valuation services to sell smart and profit big. Why? FYSI will help you plan and position your business for the maximum return. This is what separates billion-dollar companies from small businesses. And FYSI can help you secure your legacy. Time matters. So don't wait until it's too late. Use promo Dr. Phil, DRPHIL, to schedule your free $5,000 risk assessment at fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000. That's promo code Dr. Phil to schedule your assessment for free. Visit fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 today.
So some people said this was an amazing experience. I came in, I learned, it really helped me. I listened to people who had had past sexual trauma say this was, you know, enlightening and life-changing for me. The allegations that we're hearing from the former employees, it comes more from when they felt like they didn't want to do the demonstration, but they were pressured into it. And that's the part that they felt was wrong or uncomfortable or coerced. And I asked Nicole about that, and she said, you know what? I mean, we're a business, right? We were a business, and we're selling our company. We're selling the courses. That's what a business does. And so if you compare it to another type of business, any other type of business that's a selling, whether they're selling knives door to door or makeup or whatever it is, they can have sort of aggressive pressure tactics for you to sign up and buy those courses. So she likened it to that as well. Now, the issue with the people who are making complaints are, they said, look, when you're living communally, when you're essentially reliant on this company now for your necessities, for your shelter, and now you incur all of this debt, you can't really leave because you're so tied in on every level of your life there.
And you know, there have been a lot of cases with companies that were selling products, and people would come in and buy a set of products that they're to go out and sell, and then they started selling the courses on how to sell and how to promote. And there were actually Federal Trade Commission regulations that were passed against doing that. They could no longer promote people to buy the courses on how to sell the products because that's where all the money was being made.
Mhm.
And if they're forced into buying these courses for themselves, it seems to me like it starts to get incestuous, no pun intended. They're basically selling things to themselves, and it gets to be a pretty insular situation. It starts to sound like a cult if you can't express a dissenting opinion. What did she have to say about that?
These comparisons that they have, some to Nexium and Keith Rainier, the sex cult part of it, how do you see yourself as different from that? How do you feel about that comparison?
I see us as profoundly and deeply for people's freedom. First of all, I was called a guru, and I'm that's the opposite of what I'd want to be. What I trained people in, what I trained women in specifically, is that you need to find your own voice. You need to find your own core strength. You need to find your own vision, your own desire, your own yes. Those are the women I was interested in being a part of fostering, not in having anybody follow me.
Mhm.
And the sex cult, is a media-driven label because it sells. I want to be very clear that the people who are, on the government witness list and who are now complaining, we're talking about a fraction of people who actually came through the doors of OneTaste. And some people came and went to a couple classes and said, you know what, not for me. And nobody forced them to stay. Some people came and said, I love this, and I want to stay, and I want to develop my own expertise and practice, and they stayed. And then maybe they grew out of it. Nobody was forced to stay. And that there are people who now want to say, I felt manipulated. I mean, we've all been in experiences where we felt manipulated, but they don't go and, blame other people for their personal choices. Regret is very different than, accusing people of criminality.
Okay, let me talk about another tactic that's alleged in the indictment, and that is about inducing people to spend more than they really could. And there's these stories about people saying that they were members and they were being pushed to take more expensive seminars. And when they said they didn't have the money, they were actually, assisted to set up credit cards to pay for these courses.
We were a business. I mean, I think that's one of the things that gets lost in this, like that we're sort of like we're some dark, seedy sex cult that's in the background taking more money from people than they can pay. That if somebody is an adult over the age of, they're over the age of 18, they're intelligent, they know what they're doing, they have their faculties, and you're in the process of selling them a product, then of course you're going to want them to buy the product if it's right for them.
Let's go into a little bit what you've talked about consent. Because obviously consent is so important in this arena.
Everything.
There are some allegations from some of the different stories being told that there was some interesting teachings about consent. This sort of may have blurred the lines. One was, this aversion practice, teaching that you gain power and you expand your sexual energy by performing sexual acts that you don't want to do.
See, that's such a radical diminishment of what I was actually teaching. What I'm interested in is women having control of their faculties in such a way that they are not controlled by their impulses. I love this, I want more, or I'm just gonna check out and not pay attention here. So if you have control at that level of your attention, then you have control of your life. So it wasn't, you should do anything you don't wanna do. It should be, you should do self-inquiry as to why you don't. You should do self-inquiry into why you want to do that much, and you should do self-inquiry into why you don't want to look at that.
There was one part in the documentary where you're, I think, given a lesson, and you say, if you want to know the real way to deflect rape, it's a turn on 100%, because then there's nothing to rape.
Let's discuss preparedness, because we know emergencies happen when we least expect them, but instead of just taking it, we can prepare. Let's discuss Jace Case, one of your most important preparation tools. With Jace Case, you'll have emergency prescription medications on hand right when you need them. Think about it. Ever been caught off guard? Whether it's a sudden illness or a travel hiccup, the right medications can make all the difference. Jay's case is designed to take that worry off your plate. So when a minor health issue pops up, it doesn't turn into a major problem. Don't let unforeseen circumstances derail your plans or your peace of mind. Live with confidence. Take charge with Jace today. Visit jace.com and use code PHIL for a discount on your order and get emergency antibiotics on hand for the moment you need them. That's JASE.com, code PHIL, PHIL.
Right. You, as a prosecutor, know that when somebody is looking to commit a crime, what they're looking for is somebody who's walking in fear, somebody who is not paying attention, somebody who has an aura of being a victim. If you begin to have a certain kind of clarity and strength and total awareness, you decrease the amount of danger that you're in that's preventative rather than just reactive after something happens.
And I can see that message, and I hear that message from you, but I also see how people could take that and say, then does that mean that to become more powerful, I need to allow certain situations that I might run from to happen?
No, you run. That's what I'm saying. To have full control of your faculties so that you can respond accurately to whatever comes into your field. If somebody is harming you, you say no. To be able to say and do those things and to not be kind of checked out or accommodating or pleasing or scared, really, to have that kind of confidence so that whatever needs to be done, you can do. I can actually say something else. A lot of these things that I say is I worked with, 35,000 women over 30 years. So I would see women who had experiences either growing up or, in high school that were confusing. They say, I think I felt turned on when I was being violated. What do I do there? How do I accept this in myself? And the shame that women felt was so terrible that it compounded the original assault. And I wanted it to be that every woman would know that every single thing that she felt in the face of something that difficult was right. We're allowed to feel however we feel when we face something that is that traumatic.
There was another, I think, example that you talked about in the documentary, the sort of beast mentality. And you talked about a regular you had who he wanted to strangle you, and he had this beast locked inside of him. And so you allowed him to do this, to let the beast out. Again, I think, is that sort of, for some people, they might think that's reframing consent, where they should be allowing these things to be happening to them?
Right. So, first of all, that's after the videos from 2 weeks of talking to people about consent and how to work with it. And so the very last thing I would want would be for somebody who wasn't extraordinarily advanced to hear that. I never intended for that to happen. So that's the first part. And then the second part is it does have to do with consent. So I have very strong capacity in high intensity environments to grant consent and to take it away and to walk away. Mm-hmm. As women, we have to learn just to be able to say, like, no, I don't like this food, I'm sending it back. I mean, that is confronting for some women. You have to start at these very baby step levels and then begin to practice it to learn how to have total control over your own world.
You also talk in the documentary about your father.
Right.
You said, my dad was a child molester. He had experiences with young girls and used me as bait. Mm-hmm. My dad died in prison for 52 counts of child molest. I never took on the idea that he was a bad person. He was just so expansive and fourth dimensional that he couldn't confine himself into the arbitrary laws of the third dimension. That was his only crime in my mind. Now, other people might have different ideas.
Right. So I have a program, prisons to monasteries. I turn prisons into monasteries. And the idea is that if you want long-term, effective, non-recidivism, you have to address people's pathologies differently. And so you have to look at it like this is a spiritual illness. This is not just happening on the physical level. There is something about the power of compulsion. So you have to begin to address things on myriad levels. Yes, of course, accountability. Yes, of course, legal implications. Yes, of course, but you also have to address, okay, what is happening at a deeper level in the psyche, in the spirit of this person that is causing these things? And you have to get it there and then end it. And not just for the person. See, we have this idea that if you heal people, they don't deserve that. No, I don't want sick people out on the street.
Right. And I think the concern there is that the way you talk about your father, perhaps it makes people think, well, there should be accountability, right, for that. There is a misuse of sex,
right,
and that needs to be called out, and people do need to be held accountable for.
Right, and he was, and that was, if you look at the video, I talked all about that part as well, and that is absolutely necessary. Accountability is absolutely necessary, and not just for me, but for the other person. They need to go through, in my tradition, the karmic repercussions of what they've done in order to have peace of mind in themselves, in order to have reparations in themselves.
Despite some post-election optimism, Wall Street is already bracing for a rough rest of 2025. When Warren Buffett starts dumping blue chip stocks and stacking up cash, you've got to ask yourself, what does he see coming? I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. When uncertainty is this high, smart people look for stability. That's why physical gold and silver might just be what your finances need. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil, that's DRPHIL, to 50505 today.
Jennifer, you are her attorney.
I am.
In this case.
Proudly.
As far as the prosecution, it appears that they looked to try and indict or charge on sexual aspects of this.
Correct.
Which they didn't.
Yeah, because the evidence didn't support it. Correct.
They came up with one charge, and that is for conspiracy of forced labor.
Right.
Which is essentially, talking about using practices to get people to do services for you, abusive ways to do that.
Right.
But it's interesting because they didn't charge any substantive crimes within this complaint, meaning they don't describe actual crimes. They just talk about tactics.
Right.
How unusual is that?
It's unusual for there to be a conspiracy charge with no substantive offenses.
The first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any scenario where that has happened. And it's a cheap way to indict. What they are trying to do is just put OneTaste on trial. And it allows them to bring a case against really the organization, but specifically Nicole and Rachel. And they want to put this general idea of what OneTaste was about on trial. And they want to do it without identifying the who, what, when, and where, which is what we usually think of when we have to defend a case. What they've done here is, so we're going to look at the entire 12 years of this organization's existence, and we're just going to overwhelm the jury with these stories of what this organization was about, and hopefully they will find it off-putting and then ultimately just convict these women because they'll be clutching their pearls and think, oh my gosh, this can't be right. There's something criminal that must have happened.
They seem to be pulling a lot from this social media out there, what's on the internet, this documentary that Netflix did to try and sort of fill in the gaps of information and just sort of frame this in the way they want to the point where they were using some journals that were referenced in the Netflix documentary, which weren't actually journals, but they were trying to get this in as evidence in their case?
Yeah, so one of their accusers, their Jane Doe 1, if you will, who had the most outrageous claims and the most serious claims, she had a debate, a disagreement with OneTaste. She did what people do, as she brought a lawsuit against them, and they resolved it. But
there was a settlement in that case.
Yes, there was a settlement in that case. But part of that settlement was, as all settlements are, you can't disparage us, and it's confidential. And I will point out that her allegations in the civil lawsuit became very extreme when she became a government witness. So they weren't exactly the same.
I also want to clarify, you also said this is the only settlement
The
that
only.
you've had in
Ever.
all of the years.
Ever.
Yes.
The only time we were ever sued.
Okay.
Ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, tens of thousands of
Yeah.
people came through these doors.
Yeah.
So because of this non-disparagement clause, she was prohibited, pursuant to the contract she entered into, to go participate in media formats such as a documentary or speaking to journalists. And she tried to end run that when it came to the Netflix film by fabricating journals that she had her sister read in the Netflix film. And when I say fabricated, I mean fabricated. She wrote them years later and then passed them off as contemporaneous writings to corroborate her story of what she was going through at the time that she ended up departing and leaving OneTaste. And then she had her sister read them. Now, the problem here is the government endorsed this. And they were ready to go to trial in January to put a witness on to testify about fabricated evidence that absolutely could have resulted in a miscarriage of justice. And eventually the government conceded that you're right. So the prime party in the Netflix film, their main witness has now been
Exposed.
exposed as a fabricator.
All right, Nicole, I want to get back to OneTaste.
Great.
At some point, you sold OneTaste. Are you still involved with it?
To a certain extent, I give talks, but in a much more peripheral way. They use my books and the like.
Are you still involved in any way with any of the demonstrations of OM?
We don't have them.
So I just want to be clear on this. So the demonstrations, are they still being done by other people? Just
No.
not, they're not being done across the board. Right. Okay. I understand you have an app now that teaches this as well.
That's right. The app we developed, interestingly, for the scientists, so that they could use it for research, and then it ended up being that many people wanted the app. So and it seems to be going extraordinarily well.
There's another part of your work that I find very intriguing, and that is Unconditional Freedom,
Oh yeah.
which is this nonprofit that you co-founded back in 2002.
Right. And the primary idea is that if you restore dignity in people, they start healing themselves. That the foundation of pathology is a lack of dignity, a lack of understanding one's impact, really. So we have farm-to-table food. We have Michelin chefs. I'm a food server. We go in and then we develop community with folks who are, food or housing challenged. And the idea is that that's where you begin to build esteem. And so then we do the same thing in prisons. We have a program, over 80,000 people have gone through it. The largest women's prison in California, women have gone through it in order to begin to transform the people who are inside of it.
Through all of these experiences you've gone through with OneTaste and everything that happened in the lawsuits, what are the lessons that you feel you've learned? And is there anything that you would have done differently?
I misread the room in terms of understanding the impact of the assertion that women not only have a right to their desire, but a right to act on it and agency. I think I didn't understand how much upset that would cause, both in men and women alike. I think that's the prime area that I would have shifted. In terms of lessons, on a personal level, this is been the most harrowing, unimaginable experience. And people fled. Everything overnight just ended. It was devastating. But, I have a strong spiritual foundation. I have friends and family. That's always been part of it. But the fact that I'm still standing, that has to do with years of practice and a deep focus on resilience.
There's a new administration now in place under President Trump. He's putting in new attorneys. Do you think that might affect your case in any way? Is there a chance that the
Profoundly.
case might?
I do.
I hope it does, because the Department of Justice has said many things about how they care about the weaponization of the prosecuting arm, the law enforcement arm of the federal government. And we are seeing here that we have a federal agent who engaged in rampant misconduct and is still involved in the case. And we believe the Department of Justice should look at this case if they want to look at a case where there was
It's textbook.
clear misconduct.
If I weren't in it, I don't know that I would believe that this could happen. You don't believe it until you're in it.
And after all of this, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, a woman who deeply loved and believed in the power of people, women specifically, and who wanted everyone to have access to what would end suffering, the causes of suffering, and help others get out of suffering.